Scuderia Ferrari did not achieve the hoped-for results in the Formula One Grand Prix in Las Vegas. The podium brings the Italian side closer to McLaren, narrowing the gap from 36 to the current 24 points. Undoubtedly, there is regret for the missed opportunity on a friendly track that suited the characteristics of the SF24. The limitation of the Maranello car lies in its issues with tires and temperature, which were too low to generate the necessary energy in the tires and ensure proper performance. Mercedes, on the other hand, performed extremely well, securing an extraordinary 1-2 finish during the Nevada weekend. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell benefited significantly from the low temperatures. This was combined with a medium to low downforce track layout, devoid of high-speed corners, which allowed the aerodynamic platform of the W15 to remain stable and effective. George Russell was impeccable in leading the race, fending off the only challenge he faced during the Grand Prix, early on, from Charles Leclerc in the number 16 Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton also made the most of an excellent tire management strategy. This strategy enabled him to execute a remarkable recovery, climbing from 10th position to finish second behind his teammate. Max Verstappen, meanwhile, ran a clean race and secured his fourth Formula One World Championship title. Chapeau. The Dutchman had the opportunity to challenge the Ferrari cars at the end of the race, but chose to focus on the bigger picture and clinch the championship in Las Vegas. Finally, McLaren struggled more than Ferrari with tire management, showing a clear lack of pace from the start. In the first part of the race, the two Ferrari drivers experienced graining on the medium tires more than their rivals. Charles Leclerc, followed by Carlos Sainz, struggled the most with managing this detrimental phenomenon. Tire wear primarily impacted performance in the first 3 corners and the slow sector around the sphere. On average, the Monegasque driver was losing 0.8 per lap to the Mercedes W15 car of George Russell, with the worst degradation occurring after his attempted attack on the leader. The Monegasque aimed to take the lead immediately to have a clear track and manage his tires, but the tires were not yet up to temperature, and the pace dropped around lap 6. As a result of his early onslaught, the 27-year-old had taken much of the life out of his medium compound tires, making him susceptible to being overtaken. He was then passed by Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen in the space of 2 laps before being forced to pit on only lap 10. When Charles Leclerc remerged sporting the hard compound tire, he fared much better, repassing the Formula One world champion to climb back up to 4th place. But by this point the damage was done, and the Ferrari driver's winning aspirations were well and truly shattered. Max Verstappen had a strong first stint on the medium tires. The Red Bull driver was the 3rd fastest on the track, finishing the first stint behind George Russell. The British driver leading the race was half a second faster than his competitors, quickly building the gap that secured his victory through excellent tire management. The Mercedes driver, fully exploiting the characteristics of the W15, brought his tires up to temperature more quickly, suffering less from graining and wear. The same applied to Lewis Hamilton, who laid the foundation for his comeback from the very first laps. In the middle phase of the Las Vegas Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris were the first to pit, rejoining in the back positions. Even on the hard tires, the pace of the 2 McLaren cars was far off that of the leaders. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were losing over a second per lap to the Mercedes drivers, showing greater tire wear than their rivals in the latter part of the second stint. The main issue for the papaya-colored cars was the slow corners in the second half of the track. In the low-speed bends between turns 7 and 16, they were losing about 0.8 overall. Ferrari performed better on the harder compound, though the gap to Mercedes remained over half a second per lap. During the initial laps on the hard tires, the engineers requested a slow introduction, aimed at preserving the tire's lifespan. This approach allowed for better management in the latter part of the stint, limiting the time lost in the first 4 corners of the track, a critical section for the medium tires. Lewis Hamilton was the fastest in the middle sector, pushing hard during the tire introduction phase and avoiding the wear issues that affected others at the end of the stint. Max Verstappen was the fastest on track after the Mercedes duo. The world champion maintained a similar pace to George Russell, although he lost 3 seconds over the stint. The world champion managed his tires well in the early laps, only showing performance drop-off after the 11th lap on the hard tires, prompting him to pit. Telemetry data showed the Dutchman struggled mainly in the final sector, where he lost over 0.3 to Lewis. His top speed was, on average, 16 kilometers per hour lower than the Britons before turn 14. In the third stint, with a lighter fuel load, Ferrari managed to make the tires work better. Charles Leclerc was the fastest, benefiting from a very light car and effectively managing the tires. The Monegasque driver had a 3-lap introduction phase, after which he began pushing without encountering significant issues. Carlos Sainz, who pitted a few laps earlier than his teammate, had to be even more cautious during the initial laps. Specifically, the Spaniard limited his steering angle in the slow corners, a functional strategy that the pit wall evaluated positively. This approach reduced the slip angle and, consequently, the energy applied to the tires. Lewis Hamilton had a stint similar to Charles Leclerc in terms of lap times, maximizing tire performance in the early part of the stint. Unlike the Ferrari drivers and Max Verstappen, the 7-time Formula One world champion pushed hard at the start of the third stint, gaining 4 seconds on Carlos Sainz and 3 on Max Verstappen in just 3 laps. This strategy allowed him to overtake the Dutchman, secure second place, and complete the Mercedes 1-2. However, both Mercedes drivers experienced more significant performance drop-off in the final part of the race, but the standings were already determined by then. Max Verstappen was the slowest among the top drivers during this phase, allowing the Ferrari drivers to mount a relatively straightforward recovery. With less fuel, the grip issues observed on Friday resurfaced. The Red Bull RB20 struggled significantly, especially in the slower sectors and on traction leading to the long straights. The team led by Toto Wolff therefore capitalized on the unique climatic conditions to secure victory at the 6.2-kilometer Las Vegas Strip circuit in Nevada. The German team's drivers managed their tires better and, crucially, were not hampered by graining. Ferrari improved as the car lightened on the hard tires. However, the main problem for the Scuderia was the first stint on the mediums, where the pace set by George Russell was too demanding for the Italian car's tires. Both drivers pushed the tires too hard in an attempt to stay close to the leader, suffering wear before their rivals and being forced into a recovery race. Despite Charles Leclerc's irritation with his Maranello teammate, the Las Vegas Grand Prix can be considered a partial success for Ferrari in their hopes of clinching the 2024 Formula One Constructors World Championship. The Italian team sits second in the standings, and after their 27-point haul in Nevada, now trail leaders McLaren by only 24 points, ahead of the final 2 rounds of the 2024 Formula One season. But Ferrari was hoping to further reduce the deficit on a track that was expected to suit the characteristics of the SF24 car. The focus now shifts to the Lusail International Circuit in Qatar, which will most likely favor McLaren, making the Maranello team's task far more difficult next weekend.